A warm welcome from TALKWALK. This is Minoli de Almeida, continuing the series on the psychosocial impact of post-COVID, which has devastated us all. This series is intended to help us overcome these fears and face the new normal. Remember, our emotions and feelings make or break us. In this episode, we are focusing on the environment and climate change. The environment is our very existence. We got to respect it, to be responsible for it, and protect it, to avert natural disasters. Destruction of the environment will only destroy our lives. Having said that, we will now talk about our panelists, the eminent panelists we have this evening. Tehan Shafter, Jayanta Vijayasinghe, Uttara Gunawardena, and Dr. Ranil Senanayake. Dr. Ranil Senanayake needs no introduction. He is an authority on the environment and climate change, a systems ecologist, a teacher, the first international crops inspector who created the forest garden product certificate system, chairs earth restoration. So honored to have you, Ranil.
Thank you.
The environment is a grave concern. What is your take and advice?
Minoli, we are in a terrible situation, mostly because of a misguided idea of where we should be going and what our goals are as a nation. If I may paraphrase Ananda Kumaraswamy, who said, "We who call art significant, not knowing of what, are also proud to progress, not knowing whither." And that is where we are now. We are progressing, we are saying we are developing. Where are we going? What are the goals? None of the people who are taking us on this journey know where we are going. And the journey is a journey fraught with great dangers. As we can see, climate change is upon us and it's going to bring some horrendous changes. I will talk about this a little further, but it's most important for us to remember that climate change is a product of consumerist development that is based on consuming fossil energy, period. It's disgraceful that as Sri Lankans, we made official statements, albeit 30 years ago, it hasn't changed today, saying oil represents development, more oil, more development. It is oil that keeps the wheels of development moving. This was a government communique. And up to today, we still haven't changed from that. More oil, more gas, more coal. That is what is supposed to drive our development. And what it is doing, irrespective of all the environmental damage, is it is turning us into addicts. Addicts of what? Addicts of power. Look at the lights we use, the fans we use, the cars we drive. All that comes today from fossil. So the purveyors of fossil, coal, oil, gas, they are the modern drug lords. They are the ones who then attend to our addiction to energy. Until we realize this and until we break from this, and our energy supplies comes from renewable resources, we unfortunately are doomed to face a planet which is now very slowly becoming inimical to living things. We have created this, and we call it development.
What a sad situation.
Indeed.
I hope this will open everybody's eyes.
I hope so. Unfortunately, the thing is, the people who make policy are uneducated. They're very, very poorly. I mean, I know some of these people, they're hopelessly educated. They don't understand anything. They use labels, and then they use the labels to raise loans. And the loans are raised not because they're going to help the country or the people. The loans are raised so that somebody can take profits or take commissions of those loans, of the projects. And that's the only reason why they do this. Otherwise, do these huge harbors, airports, these roads going all over the place, are they going to help the people? You look at the fossil carbon cost of all this activity, it is horrendous. We are contributing to climate change by our idea of what development should be. And if we are intelligent, and we are supposed to have had a civilization that spanned 3,000 years, and if we have any of that left in us, we should be able to look at ourselves and look at the terrible situation that we have been placed into as total addicts to fossil fuel and calling that development, and we should be able to realize and make the change for ourselves. Because the politicians and the people who make the decision for us will not.
Through this series, I feel that we should lobby to ban all types of vehicles on one day of the week. Can't we walk or use a bicycle?
We can do that. In other
you might take me as a crank.
In other countries, what they've been doing, for instance in Ecuador, what they're doing to cut it down is they have a thing called plica y placa, which means the end of the numbers of your vehicle, if it's odd, you can go on one day, the evens get the other day. So that way they reduce the vehicles on the road in the cities by half. So there are simple ways to do this, but there must be the political will. Without the will of wanting to make the change and help us, it will not happen.
Vilas Otara, founder of Embark and the Otara Foundation, is a woman who has been voicing the concerns on environmental disasters. Greta Thunberg, I think, of Sri Lanka. When she started it, everybody took her as a joke. But we need more women like Otara to speak out and let the people know the truth and nothing but the truth. Go on, Otara.
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't take a scientific mind or a degree in science or anything to be able to see what's happening around us and in the country. We live over a period of years. We ourselves can see the changes that are happening in our country with floods and landslides and droughts and so many things that are so devastating to people's lives and to the lives of people, animals, and of course huge environmental impact. Sorry. So I think it's very, very visible, and a lot of us live our lives where we don't bother with what's happening around us, as long as we are happy for the day and we get what we want for the day or the week or the month. We don't really voice our concerns, nor do we ask for change, nor do we make the effort to make a difference for our country and to protect our environment, to protect our wildlife, and to protect our people. It's all interconnected. There's no difference between one or the other. And a lot of it just keeps happening the same way over and over and over again. I have seen in my lifetime that the massive change of how floods impact people, how the droughts impact people, but no decisions are ever made that I have seen over the years that change how the country functions and how we are led and how we function, to be able to put the environment as a top priority to protect, especially in a country like Sri Lanka, where we are an island and we have so much impact with so many things that the destruction that we do. and it just goes on. We have so little forest left, and we continue to remove the forest that we have. There's so much conflict between animals, and and it becomes such a big debate about the human-elephant conflict, as if the elephants have suddenly woken up and decided to attack us humans. After we have invaded their lands and invaded the lands of all wildlife, so many different things like that, and we have to start making conscious decisions, conscious changes of how we live, because it's how we live, each one of us who lives in this country, that impacts the decisions, that impacts the changes that are happening, and we also let things happen without voicing our concerns and just ignoring things that are happening that have major impact on on people's lives. And year after year we go on talking about the poverty and the how people's lives don't change, and it doesn't change because we're not making the right decisions, and the environment is having massive impact on people's lives, so it's each one of us that really needs to understand and be conscious and be aware that this is a priority that we have to address in our country before it gets even worse, because we are on the brink of the whole system collapsing, the way I see it, with related to environment, economy, because all of it is connected, and and each one of us is responsible to ask for change, to see that the need for change, and to change. It can be changed because the environment is very it does respond. When you're kind to the environment, it responds very rapidly, but when you're not kind to the environment, it responds the other way. I mean, yesterday as well, everybody's rushing around, trying to save their cars from going underwater and looking at the hills thinking it's going to slide down, and worried about the people under it. We have created that, so it's no surprise that all that is happening. So we really need to wake up, each one of us individually. We need to be more conscious, we need to be more aware, and we need to care for our country and for everyone who lives in it.
Absolutely right. I think we all got to make a concerted effort as Sri Lankans to not make our country suffer anymore. We had a tsunami, we had enough of it. So that would have taught us a lesson and been a learning curve. But have we learned? On to Jayanta Vijayasinghe, who is an environmentalist. You are a hands-on environmentalist. What is your greatest fear? Is there any hope to put things right and educate us all? How can we protect the environment?
Well, thank you for the Art Television, first of all, initiating a dialogue like this. I think it's very timely after COVID-19 and the realizations we had during the pandemic. And it's very important that we first understand what's happening around us and what is exactly climate change and how it impacts Sri Lanka. Now there's two sides of the coin. When it comes to climate change, there is this section of people that use climate change as an excuse to continue the destruction, while there is another side of another section of the community or public who put the blame on the climate change for whatever the internalized destruction that we are doing. Therefore, we need to be able to understand the climate change impacts, how it happens, and what internally as a country we could do in order to avoid or to mitigate the outcomes, the adverse effects of climate change. We have seen, like Otara very correctly mentioned before, and Dr. Ranil mentioned before, our consumption patterns and how we have seen the development over the last few decades have resulted in numerous disasters, from landslides, floods, and then droughts, and eventually ended up with a lot of economic impacts over such disasters. For instance, we had 2 years consecutively where there were 4 districts without any rain at all, and farmers had to give up farming, and paddy cultivation was not possible, and the coconut plantations had a huge hit, and the coconut went for over 100 rupees, and then the paddy was also the same, the rice was also the same. So that is how the climate change, or the drought, or for that matter floods, we have seen in 2016-17 mostly. 2016, if I'm not mistaken, the Kalani River flooding, and in 2017 the River Kalu flooding. All these have displaced more than 100,000, easily more than 100,000 people, and we lost about 250 odd lives in 2017. Now, all these are impacts of the adverse climate changes that have happened over the years, and that our capacity to deal with climate change related disasters have been a great concern, because we basically destroy all our ecosystems, whether it's riverine ecosystems, whether it's wetlands, whether it's mountains that we have removed the forest covers of them, and whether it's dry zone forest, and all these places we have basically utilized for the so-called development, and that has eventually resulted in significant destruction, and it has come to a point that we need to realize what is going on, and that like I said, these two sides of the coin need to understand that while there is the climate change happening and it is a global norm, that there is so much that internally we do that contributes to our internal climate changes, and also that eventually impacts the global climate change as well in a probably regional level. So that understanding that and ensuring that our destruction, that the rate of the destruction currently is dealt with, and thereby we are improving the current situation and reducing the disasters which impacts our economy, health, environment and everything else, and that we will never progress further despite whatever the development strategies that the policy makers are bringing in, because our environmental destruction, end of the day, will eventually reverse everything else.
Thank you, Jayant. That's so informative. I think you can write volumes on what you know. I hope the viewers understand the reality. This is the truth. Now on to Tehan Shafter, a first-year student of the Faculty of Arts of the University of Colombo and a student of SEMA. So proud to have you as a student to be on this panel. You are passionate about the environment and climate change. What are your expectations as a youngster, as a student, to take to the future generations?
For me personally, I think the biggest issue is that a lot of us think that we have a lot of time left, and my generation personally, I don't think we realize that we are in the midst of the beginning of a catastrophic sequence of events that's going to take place. Throughout my life in school, we were always taught you have to look after the environment for future generations, and I feel like that statement is now outdated, because right now it is my generation, the younger generation, that is already facing these issues, and they're all going to unfold and unravel in my lifetime. We are already seeing the loss of so many species of animals all around the world. Every year we're setting new records around the world for the world's temperature. We had terrible wildfires this year in Australia, and there are so many other climate related incidents that are happening all over the world, and it's honestly, it's very scary. And I feel like because I'm young, people may not take me seriously. They may not think that, and I personally myself don't think that I'm qualified to come and talk about this, but what I can do is, using my age, appeal to the younger generation that it's time for all of us to take action. It doesn't take experts to make changes. As long as the majority can jump on board, make the little changes, become more responsible consumers and more responsible stewards of the environment, I feel that we can make a real change in the future. or else there won't be a future for us.
Well done, Tehan. Excellent. What a lovely little bit of advice he's giving all the
Exactly.
youngsters out there.
Very good.
What have you all got to add to what Tehan has to say?
Well, I'd like to add to something, Jan, that is long before your time. The first Prime Minister of this country, the leader of this country, defined what we should be looking at as development. He said, development or the performance of my government must be judged by the larder of the poorest of our homes. Not GDP, not growth. The larder, the kitchen, what was there in the poorest of our homes, that determined success in development. We forgot that. We rushed around, buildings and all these other things was development, not the poorest of our homes. We forgot that. We forgot who we were. We forgot our country. And then what did we do? We locked on to this whole question of creating more. This is a Buddhist country. What the Buddha said was, krodaya, greed and grasping leads to suffering. Fundamental truth that we were taught when we were children. What is development today? What is economic development? The creation of krodaya, greed. I have this, not enough, I need that. I have this, oh, this is old model, I have a new model. Creating more greed, more lust for more things. That is what is supposed to be development. If the Buddha has told us that this activity is going to bring suffering, are we surprised at what we have brought for ourselves with this idea of development? We have created this for ourselves. And the reality of climate change basically lies on this whole question of fossil fuel, getting energy from fossil. What is fossil? What is fossil fuel? These are things that once lived on the surface of this planet. They died and they were put away in the rocks. Why did they do that? Because on this planet there are volcanoes that are constantly putting up carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Life has learnt how to capture that carbon dioxide and put it away and lock it away in the rocks as oil, coal, gas.
I'm afraid we've got to stop here for a short commercial break. We'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back to TalkWalk. We continue this dialogue on this most serious and important topic of the environment and climate change.
If I may just continue on the theme that we were talking about, oil, gas, coal. We have been sold the myth that planting a tree is fine, will account for it. It is a myth. The whole question of this carbon trading and carbon neutrality is bogus. It's not true. Because consider, the carbon that came into the air from fossil fuel is carbon that had been locked away for 20 million years. And we say we put it into a tree whose lifetime is 100 years, and we say that's okay. No. In 100 years, the tree dies. What happens to that carbon? Goes back into the atmosphere. So it's a sham. We have been sold a bill of goods by people wanting to make us feel good for using fossil fuel. That is a total lie. So do not get caught to this thing. Carbon neutrality is nonsense.
How ignorant have we been?
I think there are a lot of words that are so easy to throw around and so easy to brainwash us with, all this use of sustainable and not damages, sustainable, and that's a very, very common. Green, you cut down a complete forest that's been there for thousands of years, and then you put up a city there, like houses there, and then you call it green city or greenhouses or something. I mean, these are all sort of terms that are used just, what you call as greenwashing, because you don't really, it just offsets and helps us to accept and normalize the destruction that we've created, and to accept that it's okay. And our human mind is so easy sometimes to just, to just convince and to just brainwash really into thinking, oh, these are okay, oh, these are better, oh, this is development, oh, this is really good. But a lot of the time the use of the word sustainable, green, organic, all of it is a lot of it is really not the reality of what is true sustainability and what is really real. What is true sustainability is trying to keep what we have and work around it, not to clear what we have and then trying to put things that are, some sustainable, recycling, a lot of the things of no plastic, no, and recycling, but in the people who are actually producing it and churning out so much of plastic that is ending up in our oceans, on our beaches, in our rivers. Then they do programs of sort of recycling and whatever, and everyone thinks, oh, it's fine. But in the meantime, nothing is done to actually to get people to reduce it, to reduce buying the plastic bottles, to reduce using the plastic bags, to stop using the plastic bags. Nothing is like, the messaging of that is so minimal compared to all the other part that goes on with, with helping us to think, oh, the right thing is being done. So we are the ones who really need to start understanding, as he said, it's upon them. It's not the future generation. It's here. And we have to act, because it is going to affect us, and we can do whatever we want for the economy, but we are not the only way. We will have Sri Lanka will have a wealthy nation which is wealthy for all, for the majority, not for the very, very minority. Is if we make the environment one of our top 3 priorities of things to protect in Sri Lanka, and where everything we do is worked around that, every decision, every development decision. We don't talk about that at all. People use the word sustainable and things, but it's just used, and the actual action doesn't happen, and the actual decisions are not based on what's good.
And we are so ashamed of ourselves to be so gullible, and we continue to be gullible. What is the solution?
Well, we are letting it happen, isn't it? I mean, like as a nation, the people are letting it happen, and we are responsible, really. There's no point pointing fingers at different people, because we are also part of that, and we have to all change. So many people see it now and can see what's happening and the damage we are creating, but we all have to be part of the solution, and the youth have to be part of it. And I mean, they are inheriting a country and a world that is really damaging, and it's not healthy.
Is it some sort of corporal punishment you're talking about
to
bring these people?
What's required is for us to understand, I believe, what Otara was saying is quite right. It is Carl Jung, who has studied the human nature and the human mind for so long. He has a very, very significant statement. He says, those who know nothing about nature are of course neurotic, because they are not adapted to reality. What he's saying is, the more we dissociate ourselves from nature, the more we get into our buildings, high rises, whatever, and we are cut off from nature, we become neurotic. We can damage ourselves, we can damage others, we can damage what's around us. And that's what's happening today. the decisions on the rural environment are being totally made by people whose reality is sunk in the urban environment, and the concrete and glass is all they see. Of course they're neurotic. Of course they'll destroy the country, they'll destroy themselves and destroy us. That's what people like Jung are telling us. It's for us to understand and step back and look into ourselves first before we can say, hey, I want to do this for the country. That is so important. Learn what the country is. Go to the country. Live in it, for God's sake. This is so beautiful. Don't think of megapolis and a mega city that's garbage. That's not the country. You have lost the country when you go that way. So come back to the country if you want to save it.
Quite right. I really appreciate what he's saying. Everybody is going high up and they don't appreciate what is down below.
Absolutely.
Just to add to what Dr. Anil was saying, and also to link to your previous question on the first round, is there any hope? Is there anything that we could do, and how can we come out of this situation? Is an interesting topic to discuss, because we know what's going on, we know what has happened over the years, and it is on our hands now to find solutions, and solutions come within first. It's me who need to first change, and then only everything will change. So we need to think of our lifestyle, what we consume, and how our domestic, how our houses and our daily essentials, to the transportation, to electricity, to water usage, and everything is managed. And then we have to look at the company level. The companies have a responsibility. It is the citizens and also the corporate citizens, the companies operating in this country. Like Otar and Dr. Anil was saying, most of the companies do speak about carbon trading, carbon offsetting, zero carbon, carbon neutral, all these concepts. Sustainability, sustainable develop. Countries speak of sustainable development goals, and have now we as Sri Lanka has produced a document called NDC, the nationally determined commitments to internally determined commitments to the international community under the Paris Agreement, and have said that we are going to cut down 16% from our energy generation itself in terms of carbon emissions, and the transportation, there are separate targets that we have committed to achieve. So it is the now the government have not gone in line with the promises that we have made to the international community. That is sad. But if we know, if the government, like all of us were saying, the government is not making the right policies, there are still two that is citizens and the corporate citizens who can still make a change. So there is a big responsibility on the companies, because they are more sustainability focused by default, because when you are dealing with the international community, you are required to meet certain standards. So companies are thriving, or if they are showing that they are trying to be more sustainable, so they have a greater responsibility of understanding the real issue. So individually we have a responsibility in terms of our domestic household consumption, to how we do things, and the companies have a responsibility. Government have a separate responsibility, that is an international commitment that we need to make and achieve. Now, is there any hope? Yes, there is hope, but we need to act right now. Just today in the morning, I was listening to the radio. There was a news item that said the polar bears will be completely extinct by 2100. There will not be any polar bears after 2100, research suggests. Now, with polar bears, you have the seal, that is their food, and then the seal population to the other issues in terms of diversity will occur. And that is just one species. We know a lot of species have been extinct over the last so many years, and every single day in this country itself, and we have point endemic species in this country in many places, and we have no plan how to protect them. So we have a hope, and that we still have an opportunity, and we need to understand it now and act now. For instance, now speaking of development, we spoke about a lot of things. Now we know a country like Bhutan, Costa Rica, or for that matter Ecuador you was mentioning about, and then Nigeria, for instance, the changes they are making in terms of sustainability is so great. But what do we do? Now just a month ago we offer a tender to we decided to go ahead with another coal power plant, while in 2017 that the government said it has no plans to develop any more coal power plants. So this is the type of policies that will eventually put us in danger and contribute to the global warming, to the climate change, to the pollution and everything. So, and speaking of the forest cover, the government says it has 29.6% of a forest cover, while we know that there is no more than 9,500 square kilometers of forests. So what do we end up at? Roughly about 17%. So we still are going to put our other state forests in danger. So these are going to be destroyed. So we need to make the decision right now. We have beautiful wetlands, we have beautiful mountains, catchments, everything is under threat, and we are building too many reservoirs, submerging tens of thousands of hectares of thick forests. Now the forests create water and it brings us the rain, and that rainwater is what we are going to harvest by building a reservoir. But if you cut down the forest the very forests that are creating the rain, what are you going to store in these tanks that you are going to build? So this is what I wanted to highlight, that we have to act now and understand that this development we are pursuing is not going to bring us any hope. If it had happened since Mahavali, fast-phase Mahavali scheme, 45 years down the line, we should have been a developed country. But has anything changed? Have anything changed? We plan to give electricity to India. And where have we ended up with all these major reservoirs we built up in the Central Hills?
And that's with spending billions and billions as well. And I would like to add to that is where they were talking about the other countries like Costa Rica, because I've been to Rwanda, in the last 2 years. I was part of a naming ceremony they have for their gorillas. And that's one example that you can see where it's led by the president of the country, where environment is top priority of things to change from what it was to make it as part of policy of everything that they do and decisions they take. And they've brought such amazing change. The gorilla population has grown from something like 200 in the past. They were virtually almost extinct, and now they're up to like 650 gorillas. They're so protected. The forests are so well protected. They're connecting forests from one to the other to be able to increase the other wildlife. They're, as we know, what they had before. It was virtually, they lost virtually all their wildlife, and now they're the genocide, and then they're trying now to rebuild that. And like every decision, they took me through all the policies and what they're working on and all the reforesting and it's properly planned reforesting, not just to say we are having a tree planting and planting trees everywhere and then it's like a good, just as if we have done a good thing, but properly planned, properly, the whole where they want to go, they know with regards to the environment. And it's amazing change that's happening, and it's such a good example of where change is possible if you make it a priority, because they understand the link, how it's devastating their crops if there's no forest and different issues like that come up. So positive change is possible if you have the will, and if you have the desire, and if you have the understanding and the knowledge of the importance of protecting the environment and making changes which are beneficial for the majority and for the whole country, that positive change is possible, and there is great hope.
I'm afraid we got to stop again for the short commercial break. Welcome back to TALKWALK. A very interesting dialogue. I think we should revert back to the power, the Norachale, the misery we are having through that. I can't understand, having been blessed with so much sunshine, why we are not going solar.
Well, one thing I'd like to point out about Norachole, I was just doing some recent research, and I'm finding out that Norachole releases hot water which is loaded with chemicals to kill organisms, because they don't want that hot water organisms building in their tubes. They release the equivalent of 2 times the Victoria Dam, the reservoir, every year into the ocean around them. That kills everything, the larvae, the fish, the invertebrates, everything gets killed. The corals, because corals are temperature sensitive, this pushes the temperature up, slightest rise in ocean temperature, corals bleach. So that is creating a total disaster in the ocean, not addressed with one statement even up to now.
Sad, so
Yeah.
sad.
That's
But-
2 kilometers,
Off.
Offshore, and that is too hot to release. Such water should never be released into
course.
the ocean. And they had this. That is one side of the
course.
story. The other story is that they intake water, salt water from the sea, and they have all these filters broken, and you have all these creatures getting trapped in the thing, and you have heaps of loaded in the powerhouse building. So
Shells.
that's another story.
Shells.
Pathetic, isn't it?
Shells, yeah, but to stop them from coming in, they put poisons to kill them so that they won't come inside. So that poison goes back into the ocean with the hot water. But that is getting addicted. This is the price of our addiction to fossil. Now there is a way out of this for us. And the way out is, it was before our eyes, the thing that makes us live. That is the ecosystem services that enable humanity to exist on this planet. What is that? Ability to breathe. The oxygen, where does it come from? Plants. Plants produce oxygen. Today, the oxygen concentration of the planet is now starting to go down because we are burning it for industry, we are burning it for our rocket ships, planes, all of it. Nobody pays 1 penny to put it back. Now, if we paid for the photosynthetic biomass, which is the engine that creates clean water, oxygen, and food for us, if we invest in that, then we are investing in a globe that's moving towards sustainability, health, and the ability for future generations to live on this planet. What we are doing today is we are cutting the forest, we are removing all the green from the forest, and we are not giving a penny to a person who would put it back and bring the life back to our atmosphere. I would like to state that after struggling for years and years to get the international system used to it, now Sri Lanka has the first company on the planet that is going to capitalize on primary ecosystem services, and we are inviting investment in this company so that we can turn the planet green through the people who will make money in investing in this area. This, I believe, is the new direction we should go in.
Wow, that's good advice.
Dr. Anil, since you brought the conversation to the sea, there was something I wanted to point out is that I feel like personally, I feel like I'm opposed to beach cleanups, though that's something that's very common now. Because I feel like to a certain level it's hypocritical, because you see a lot of people going and coming together as a group and cleaning, which is a good effort in itself, but it's not the solution to the problem.
Yes.
The solution to the problem, like how yourself, Otara and Jayanta also pointed out, is as long as we don't change people's mindset towards their habits of consumption, we're still going to be continuing to pump garbage into our oceans, into our water bodies. And I feel like while all of those initiatives are good, I think that the main thing that they're lacking is educating the people who come for those things. I feel like right now it's too much of an external show of wanting to be sustainable or wanting to be a part of a bigger cause. I think the lack is in education. I think that a lot of you, all three of you, have a lot of knowledge you can share with young people and everyone else about their consumer habits. Like, for example, how much water goes in to the production of just a t-shirt or a blazer or a pair of jeans, just consumption habits, how, you know, your wear, throw and rebuy, that is the mindset that we have in this country. And how can we move towards more sustainable gift giving, where we gift experiences and things like that to people rather than being too materialistic? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think, you know, like, okay, the beach cleanups and things are good for awareness and, you know, to make people more conscious and all that. But yes, it doesn't solve the problem, because the next day the beach is the exact same way, the way it was before. And, you know, we are really at a time of having to be conscious about what we consume and the trail that goes into that of what we consume. I mean, you spoke about the t-shirts and all that. I was part of that whole system of fast fashion, and even I didn't quite understand at that time, but now I know, like, the, you know, the major impacts that it has. And really, we don't need to keep buying and buying and buying, you know, all the time the same things over and over, because we all create an impact on the planet. We are all part of the you know, the damage from the food we eat. We are part of a huge cruel chain of you know, of hurt and harm that we are part of by the, you know, in the meat industry, which again then translates to the environment with the amount of land needed for the cows and, you know, for the other animals. Even that's a whole different thing. So we really need to start being very conscious about what we shop, how we buy, where we go, the places we go. You know, sometimes we go to places and then we don't realize, we think it's a wonderful place and it's beautiful, but then we don't realize that, you know, like a massive forest has been cut down to create that space, that joy and that desire for us, and which we think is so wonderful. But then we have missed, you know, like, okay, just a couple years ago there was this amazing forest with elephants and things there, and now, you know, that it's turned into something else, and all that is for us. You know, it's not because we are going, we're part of that. So we really need to start being more aware, more conscious about the choices we make, and it's us consumers that can change, you know, the pattern of things, because we are the ones fueling it as well, with our desire, with our total attachment to things. And it's a human thing that we're so attached to things and wanting more and more and more and more each day. And I think
looking for short-term pleasure,
and you know, it is a short-term.
Krodaya,
greed,
desire, greed. The Buddha has said it so clearly.
Yes.
And in a Buddhist society, to find them chasing greed and calling that development is madness. I tell you something that disturbs me hugely, and that is, our Buddhist clergy is also wrapped up in this. It is horrible. There is no Vinaya. They are not looking after the Vinaya. Where are our leaders? Our spiritual leaders are lost. When you lose a spiritual leader, we are lost.
Absolutely.
And that is what has happened to us.
We are the flock.
Just to answer Tehan, his question of the problem of education, that's very vital. We need to understand, like I said, there's this two sides of the coin, that one part of the one section of the community who are probably politically motivated, or probably diluted in a way that they think the development, any sort of development, has to continue. It doesn't matter at what cost, it has to happen, and that the global climate change is just a global term, that we have nothing to do with it, we can't do anything about it. And on the other side, that people also think that our individual contributions don't matter much and it's not a big deal. Now that mentality has to change, and it will only change with the education. So the young generation has to be educated and made understood that everything that you do. Now we spoke about plastics. Now plastics and polythene is just linked with everyday consumption. What are you going to buy, and where are you going to buy, and how you going to dispose of your packaging, and all that is a basic thing that we should educate kids from the school age. And that education doesn't have to be systematic also, it has to be something that starts at home. So that for instance, at my place, I haven't for the last so many months, probably a year or so, I can't remember, I've not given any organic waste to the urban council, because in my 7 perch land I have a small place where I put all my garbage. We call it a Jiva Kotua in Sinhala. That's a sort of you make it with Vatamara glyceria, and you put it in, so that with all the fresh air coming in, there is no smell coming in, and it gets it becomes fertilizer soon after. And the plastic and the polythene waste, what I do is that we put it into a sort of a bottle, plastic bottle, and for 3 months even we cannot basically fill it up. So there are little things that we can do as individuals to stop all these pollution. So Tehan, very valid. We need to do something about education.
Yeah,
I'm worried about the food service providers sending hot food in plastic containers. Aren't you all worried about that?
Yeah, of course.
How do we contain it and stop it? How do we educate them not to put hot food into plastic containers?
We have to ask for that. We have to ask for that.
Consumers need to be conscious.
Like when I go to get a buy a coffee or a tea, I take my own mug, because I don't want to take that cup. I don't want to have that plastic lid anymore. And
I think it's difficult if we just expect people to change their mindset towards it. I think there needs to be some kind of policy where it's made compulsory, because all companies are driven by profit, and the cheapest option would be plastic. It would be something that's not good for the environment, and so unless it is made policy, it doesn't make sense financially for them to make those changes. So how in the future do you see some policies coming in like that? Do you think it's possible? Do you think that people will be making that change?
Right now there's this talk of extended producer responsibility, that's called EPR, where any company that produces plastic and polythene have to take the responsibility, part of the responsibility of what they are disposing of. So there are innovative ways some of these international companies, overseas companies are using, for instance, that they collect all these packaging and all that and give an incentive for people. Say you bring 5 cans of some beverage, I would say, and that you're getting a free beverage. So something similar. We have to be very innovative in how we do things, and it's not going to cost that much per se.
And I also think that's also where this whole profit versus sustainability comes in as well. True sustainability over profit brings for that you really have to make true sustainable changes as well. Which I think has not been happening, and we are at a time where every company, every person has to take the responsibility to do that.
I think
You're-
offering incentives,
Yeah,
especially to
Otara is
kids.
right about sustainability.
Yes.
They're using the word too much. What is sustainability? What are we talking about?
Please explain.
Sustainability is the ability. Gordon Conway says sustainability is the ability to recover from perturbation and stress. If you can recover and carry on, you're sustainable. Now, how do we measure it? Well, I've written some papers and all that stuff on the measurement of sustainability. And what we find is this: sustainability is a changing state. It can only be stated in terms of the state of that thing before. You measure it once, you measure it again, and you will find in your measurement there would be the slope. Is it positive? Is it negative? If the slope is positive, you're sustainable. If the slope is negative, you're not. And the angle of the slope will tell you how sustainable. The sharper the angle, the more sustainable. It's a mathematical formula. It's easy to apply, and you can apply to anything we do, and then we can measure ourselves and say, is this process sustainable or not? And you can measure it, and it'll tell you.
Okay, if I could just ask another question.
Yes.
I feel like this issue, the point that it is at now, it's almost too complicated for parents who also don't have enough knowledge about it to be teaching
True.
their children at home.
Absolutely.
True.
Do you think that this should become, since it's such a widespread issue, that it should become a staple of school education as well and should be included in
should.
the curriculum?
It should also be included in your spiritual or philosophical education,
Yeah.
because that's where you really start to affect yourself internally, and you know, hey, am I doing right or am I doing wrong? So from that point onwards,
Yes.
we have to educate children and bring them up to
For
be
all of them.
responsible citizenry.
To be brought up as stewards, better stewards
Absolutely.
of the environment. and the world,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And things
Yes.
like gardening, being
Yes.
in the soil, playing in the soil, being in the environment. I mean, that's something that I grew up with, and then eventually things changed. Like I remember going to the market with baskets with my mother and all that, and then I went in a different direction, and now I had to come back to that to that life that I had, like 30 years ago.
Indeed.
So it
Then
is
again,
education of
now people,
as well.
children are not sent out to the garden
Yeah.
because of the mosquitoes
or
because
dirt,
of the
Mhm.
dengue.
or it's
So now
it's
what is the
considered
solution?
dirty.
It is
Well, you previously also asked about the solar power, why we are using coal and why not solar.
Solar.
Now, I have seen some of my friends at their houses trying to put up solar power, and utilities such as CEB is not supporting their attempt. So here in this country, like Tehan said, while the education is important, the policies, right? Policies has to come in place. So for him to put up a solar power plant at his rooftop, roughly costs about 250,000. The unit he tried to put, and he had to wait for like almost a year until he got the net metering connection. Now, that's a big loss. So people need to be incentivized to be sustainable and reduce the emissions at home and be more environmentally friendly in terms of policies and how the other government entities are supportive of this entire thing. Now, similarly, when it comes to plastics, while the domestic, the home houses that we do our thing, there has to be certain policies supporting that change and incentivizing it probably. And in terms of the companies, like we said, okay, we bring home bottles of beverages and then food wrapped up and packed in plastic and polythene or whatever. And if there is a proper policy that this extended producer responsibility is vested with the producer himself to a greater extent, then they will also be incentivized to make a change, or probably we will also be incentivized to collect it, store it in a proper way so that we can dispose of, or rather give it back to the company itself. So there are things at the domestic level that we could do. The electricity consumption, for instance, we, if you look at our viewers, look at your house right now, how many unnecessary unattended lights are switched on. And how many fans, how many ACs, probably any other electrical device. You may not need them, but you just keep it switched on, maybe your laptop monitor or your computer monitor. Similarly, water usage, and do you have leaking pipes, and you have like too much of units used every month. So we need to look at our electricity consumption, water consumption, plastic and polythene usage, and then our transportation, and then all these things eventually that contributes to the emissions and pollution, waste, have to be looked into at our domestic household levels and reduce as much as possible, so that you can be happy. At least if you can't change the world, at least you can be happy yourself that you have not been a part of the problem.
This is actually a appeal to the policymakers. Please listen to our voice, because I think high time we did a change, a complete system change in this country.
If there is one thing I can bring our conversation back to, it's something that I didn't understand until probably a few months ago. I always felt like people talk about species extinction, the pandas reducing. Now Jayant mentioned about how polar bears are going to go extinct, and I think a lot of people are ignorant of how that will actually end up affecting the human population as well. I remember reading an article about Yellowstone National Park where the wolves were hunted to extinction, and people thought that was fine because it was safer for them to go out. But what ended up happening was the caribou became overpopulated, there was overgrazing, and there was a collapse in their ecosystem where humans had to reintroduce the wolf population back. So how could something like, if you could please just share with us, any of you, how could the polar bear population being affected, how could that have an impact on our lives as well?
Well, we can talk about it in elephants.
or any species. Because people feel like since we don't interact with those animals on a daily basis, that it won't have an effect on us. But how will it have an effect on our ecosystems?
First, the animals and plants tell us, that's nature, they tell us what's going on. For instance, in Sri Lanka, you look at an endemic fish, Barbus titea, called letitia, red small fish like that, Barbus nigrofasciatus, found in our rainforest streams, was found around Colombo, was found in all these areas. But as soon as the pollution of the streams begin, they disappear. They can't take it. Now, it means the same thing to somebody living in the village, because they, as a child, I used to go around the streams catching fish, right? We used to say, when this is missing, it means that things are going wrong. Your water is getting poisoned. We must learn the simple signs that nature is showing us of the danger, and we must teach each other, because this is not complicated, it's not rocket science. You know, we can take some kids to the stream and say, look at these things. If they are missing, you know something is going wrong. Oh, in Australia, when I was working in Australia, dryland salinity was a major problem, and all Victorian government, because all of a sudden the salt would rise, and a paddock, entire area goes brown and dies. And they had indicators, they had sinkholes drilled to check the water constantly. And what I realized when I went there was that if you listen to the frogs in the night, the salt sensitive frogs, their voices disappear long before the salt comes up. Listen to nature, look at nature, she's always telling you things. Learn how to read what nature is saying.
There is a very interesting example that I can give you, Tehan. You spoke about fish and small streams having fish in Colombo and in suburbs. Right now we don't have these fish species anymore. And when I was schooled in Gampaha, we had small streams passing, because we used to walk to the school, and all these streams had all types of freshwater fishes. And today there are no more. The result is that we have a greater number of mosquito population, like dengue cases, more dengue cases. At my house in Colombo, at Borelas Gamo, every evening 6:30 there is this small group of bats come, and they fly around and eat the mosquitoes. I have videoed it, mosquitoes are eaten by bats, dragonflies, and some birds, and especially the eggs, when the mosquito lay eggs on the water, the fish. And now we have broken that whole system. And on the other hand, we speak of acacia, for instance. In Rakwan, I took footages of the acacia plants, and under them you have hundreds of bees dead. We don't know the reason. Some say the tonic, what do you call the when the bees drink the tonic that comes of acacia, it's probably something poisonous, they say. I don't know scientifically what it is, but what I know, what I saw is that you have hundreds of bees on the ground dead under the acacia trees. I videoed it because some people don't want to agree that acacia causes this problem. Now you have, when you don't have bees, you know what happens?
Absolutely. There won't be life.
Yeah, there won't be life. The flowering won't happen, and the agriculture will be impacted.
During the lockdown, there were millions of butterflies suddenly in the garden.
Yes.
So they had their freedom.
Exactly.
And the flowers, I don't know if you noticed
Yes.
that
Yes.
the flowers on the trees. I've never seen so many flowers as
Exactly.
during lockdown. It was everywhere.
So why can't we sustain this?
Well, that's
And carry on.
that's what COVID has taught us. If there's any lesson that COVID taught us, that is slow down. Because as soon as COVID hit, you look at China and look at the nitrogen oxide levels, it just went down immediately. All over the world, wildlife came back into the cities. It says that nature would like to heal herself. We just need to give her the chance to do it, which is what we are not doing. We are all a part of nature. We are a part of life. We have the capacity to recognize it and give life the opportunity to restore the support systems for all of us. Instead of which, right now, with our policies and with our economic greed, we are destroying the very basis of life. This is not development, this is destruction. We must stop.
I think Tehan can take this message to all the young
He
people.
should. He must, because
He
it
must
is
take
his
it to the
world coming
generations
up.
to come.
It's your world coming up.
Yeah, and we are all one. We are all interconnected. You can't separate it. I mean, you can't
Absolutely.
make decisions without
Yes.
thinking about the environment, the people, and the animals. We are not
course.
separate from each other. We are all interconnected, and affecting one, destroying one definitely affects the other, and
Even the
it's time
dengue
to know that.
It's not under control yet. No, it
Not
is
yet.
so sad.
I mean, even
It
in my
is.
home, like you was earlier, I used to have dragonflies, gay kurullas, so many birds. They're all missing, and,
No
and
gay
it's
kurullas
because
at
they're
all.
spraying chemicals. All the dragonflies are dying,
Yes.
and so much, and that shows how much chemicals there is in there,
Yeah.
which we are breathing,
In the water too.
and in the water
Well,
too.
the
actually,
incidents-
I should share with you that I have all the gay kurullas and dragonflies
Oh,
and everything
because
around
you're
me.
lucky.
Why?
He lives in
Because I
Belagala.
chose to live out of Colombo.
Yeah.
Now, look at what I have and what I have done. I am example. I'm setting myself as the example. Here we are in Colombo with people struggling to buy a little concrete box in the sky for 20 million rupees or something like that, right? For 1/4 of that price, you could buy a beautiful property somewhere in the country and live on that property with your family, raise your children in health, and create a beautiful space for you to live in, where everything else can live with you. Having that chance, are we that idiotic that we think that this is development and we take our children and our futures into this mega madness? I think it's nuts.
I think the most important thing of this discussion, and at home, anyone watching this discussion, is to acknowledge the fact that we are contributing to the destruction. We are also a part of this environment, and everything we do eventually affects the environment. So if we acknowledge that individually, and companies, corporates acknowledge that at corporate level, and the governments acknowledge that at government levels that their development plans and their development activities are impacting the environment and it impacts, I think we can address this issue. As long as all three of us don't acknowledge the fact that we contribute to the destruction, it will be very hard for us to address the issue.
So it is more detrimental than good, all this planning they're talking about.
Absolutely. Because
shouldn't they
yes,
ban the mosquito coil? What do you think about that?
I think
Some can't do without it.
it's
like
really a
medicine
problem. It is. Unfortunately, to solve one problem, you're creating another problem for yourself, which may be even worse.
And the incidence of lung disease.
Yes.
Children,
Yes.
small children are having the wheeze.
Absolutely.
All this is because of this pollution.
Yes. Yes.
I don't want to take this discussion into an entirely different area, but I'll tell you a very valid question you asked. This mosquito coil is a business that was promoted alongside the mosquitoes being promoted. You see, there are several other trades that I can tell you, several other examples I can tell you. One classic example is bottled water. You deprive of the right for clean water and provide bottled water at a huge cost. That's a business for someone. So this environmental destruction is not just destruction itself, but is a business for someone else. So we need to understand that also, especially Tehan, that is something that every young people, everyone in this country should understand. There is a different agenda behind the destruction too.
Unfortunately, the young people are being taught that is the business to
Exactly.
get into. Make money, make business, the war or whatever, make money because good business. That's all that we are trained to think.
Instead
no
of
values,
Nothing,
only money.
nothing.
Instead of increasing the population of the dragonflies, the bats, the birds, the frogs, the everyone else, you're giving them a mosquito coil. That's not going to solve the problem.
It goes hand in hand. I feel like there's a gross lack of accountability in most of these issues.
Exactly.
Yes.
And people don't even know that they exist because they're just being fed a lie over and over
Absolutely.
again without being fed a solution.
And unfortunately, this is the media, and this is how the responsibility the media has. And again, look what's happening around the world. Look what's happening in the US with Donald Trump. I mean, and the media, what a destructive message he has. And he's destroying a nation, and the media lets him do it.
But the nationalistic minded people of America,
That's the problem. Their minds are
everything what he
yes.
has.
Finally,
Yes.
just another example. You will see what I said is very valid and everyone should understand. We have the biggest kidney hospital building in Polonnaruwa, and the World Health Organization and local experts have said that the cause of the problem is this. I don't want to tell you 1, 2, 3 or 4 what are the causes of the problem, but have we done anything to address the cause of the problem?
But I'll tell you what the cause of the problem is. Consider, look at history, right? Did we have any of these kidney and other allied diseases? When did we start? It started early 1970s.
Yes.
Then you have to ask a question, did we do something radical in the early 70s to change our system? Yes. In late 60s, we began the Green Revolution, and we grabbed the Green Revolution with all their chemicals and the pesticides and the fertilizers, this whole package, and we brought it to our farmers and poisoned them. That is the thing. Not one, but the whole package of the Green Revolution brings the toxins, agrotoxins that are killing our farmers.
Poisoned our water and poisoned our food.
So much of advice for us to take. I'm afraid that's all we got for you this series. Up until next Wednesday, this is Minoli de Almeida signing off.